some reflections at this Bandon Monastery Museum. Well, the setting up of the monastery troupe is a very interesting, positive initiative because it connects the puppets, the tangible, with the art of puppet performance, the intangible, with all this heritage of music and dance, recitation, poem, literature, etc. But the flip side is that when there is some kind of economic gains concerned, because the troupe can be commissioned to perform in many places and they get income from performance. So there is some kind of tension between the monastery, the elderly members, the young group leaders, as well as the local authorities in the control of the management of the troops and in the distribution of the income from performance to members of the troop and to the monastery. So it's kind of, we hear stories about conflicts and tension. But I think to some extent they were able to reconcile these tensions among themselves, and the troupe continues performing and they've been invited abroad and so on. So, but every time you go, you hear stories about, oh, they take this performance to perform without my permission. Sometimes, I should have been paid a little bit more, and so on and so forth, or the monastery should have been paid a little bit more. You hear stories like this, but I think this is quite common. But in the end, they're able to reconcile and come to some kind of negotiation. Now, I was talking about they get some help from professional Bangkok dancer to improve the dramatic techniques. This has become another point of contention between this issue of authenticity and innovation. Because the Bandon style, they tend to be more fast-paced than kind of other performances by other monastery, other troops. And they use modern costumes. They wear gray costumes, and they use like hat to cover their head and so on, which is a modern tradition. So they have, this draws some kind of criticism from scholars and some experts about their style of performance that does not adhere precisely to the classical style. But the Bandon says that, oh, they've won a lot of competition, so they're not worried about that. It means that the market and the audience like their style, which probably faster or more interesting, more stimulating, more entertaining. So I mean, this is another issue that has been going on. Well, another issue is about children who have been trained. I mean, children, once they grow old, they go to university or they get a job, so they stop being part of the troop. So you have to continually train new batch of students to replace the old ones. So that's quite a lot of job, and recruiting can be difficult. Coming to the conclusion now, I would like to leave you some points for discussion. You can think about whether you can adopt some of these activities in your museums, or whether you can find ways of creating space of learning in the sites that you are now participating and working, studying. Or you might find some of the activities appropriate for you, some are not, because of different local contexts, different communities, different operators, different schools, and so on and so forth. But these are the points that I would like to leave you with. The first one is that generally this is a situation in Thailand. I don't know about other places. I would like to hear your inputs as well. We find that local community, monastery museums, museums that are local museums or community museum or monastery museums have very limited resources. Both the funding or the personnel, as I said, that operators are working on voluntary basis and limited time basis. And the management of the museum is embedded in traditional and local practices and local context and local religious cycle. So this sometimes makes it difficult to organize children activities on a regular basis. So most of the activities that I have been talking about are temporary. Once the resources are over, there is little continuity except during festivals, right? The second point is that I think we have to understand the vitality of local museums in terms or in the context of the cultural setting of that community. So museums come to life during religious festivals and they tend to be sleepy the rest of the time. Is that okay? Is that appropriate? Or should we try to make this museum operate as national museums or government museums that have permanent, regular curators and operate on a kind of regular basis? I don't know. At the moment, because of the resources are so tied up with local context, I feel that it is appropriate for local museums to operate according to the local context rather than trying to make them, a different kind of museum.